An uneasy equilibrium is probably the best way to describe Jordan's internal and external positioning, having an awkward unpopularity with supposedly friendly and hostile nations. A government that is viewed as pro-Israeli, yet its people would obviously vote otherwise. It's a tricky business being a Jordanian. They've fought for the liberation of the Palestinians and their right to self-governance, yet have gone to war with Arafat's PLO over his people's interference with the business of the Jordanian government. In 1970, Jordan did battle with Syria, yet in 1973, just 3 years later, Jordan's military marched to defend Syria when Israel attacked them. Even today, millions of Syrian refugees fleeing the civil war after the Arab Spring are still being hosted by Jordan. For almost 50 years, Jordan was in a state of war with Israel, yet the Jordanians recently shot down Iranian missiles undoubtedly destined for Israel, preserving the unwanted view held by pro-Palestinians that Jordan is too friendly with the Israeli government. This cozy Israeli-Arab stance Jordan finds itself in has resulted in both pro-Arabs and pro-Israelis viewing them with cynicism, yet it was the Jordanian government that was double-crossed by their Arab counterparts when they agreed to support the 1967 Arab invasion of Israel. Those are some of the challenges in foreign affairs Jordan has dealt with or continues to manage. Internally, the country is limited in terms of natural resources, especially when compared with its neighbors. Furthermore, despite occasional brief periods of economic highs, Jordan is riddled with high unemployment and tribalism. Surely, this scenario of intense internal and external refereeing cannot endure indefinitely for the powers that be. Now, Jordan's inability to take extreme positions in the region is understandable. But if divisions between Israel's supporters and the Arab allies becomes more entrenched, which has been the trend lately since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, then the region will become a global pressure point and Jordan's hand may be forced into radicalism. A reality that makes the Jordanian authorities to be even more assuaging with their dealings. Yet despite all these difficulties, anarchy is not a word you can use when describing the state of Jordan. Jordan's capital city is Amman. And of course, since the city is based in this Abrahamic region, it has history that's thousands of years old. So, let's quickly go through the ancient part.
Welcome to Amman, Jordan's capital city. Here, poverty and wealth live side by side. At first sight, the city's ancient roots are not obvious. However, they date back to biblical times. In around 1200 BC, Rabat Ammon was the residential city of the Ammonite. But the first settlement was established on the Jebel al-Kala, the citadel's 837-meter high hill. In the Bronze Age, a fortress was built here. It was later used by the Umayyads. They built their main palace on top of the hill. Today, most of the original Roman city centre is buried beneath modern roads and buildings. But the ruins still highlight the dimensions of the original structures. Pompeius conquered the city in 63 BC and founded the Provincia Arabia. Next to the Forum is the Roman Odeon that was excavated in 1957 and has since been on display in all of its former glory. Music and various performances once took place here, and the view across the hills made it a wonderful setting. Roman buildings that had become commonplace since pre-Christian times were also built in Philadelphia, as the city was then called, such as the Modarag al-Roman, the great Roman amphitheatre. Theatres to entertain, with plays and bloody animal contests, And because of its superb acoustics, it continues to be used right up to the present day. Next to the Roman amphitheatre is the Folklore Museum. Here the young can also learn of their country's cultural history. Traditional Bedouin jewellery and drinking vessels are also on display. In 1900, the Ottoman Sultan ordered the construction of the Hejaz Railroad. It was designed to unite the Ottoman Empire that had begun to disintegrate, as well as to transport Muslim pilgrims to Medina in the Hejaz Mountains.
Jordan's system of government is monarchical. The royal family has held sway since the 1920s after being recognized by the British government in what was then known as the Transjordan. This was kind of a reward for supporting the British against the Ottoman Empire in World War I. Although family divisions have occasionally become a public concern, the royals have mostly maintained a show of unity in governance.
Only recently, the Arab states had a day of rejoicing as King Abdullah of Transjordan commemorated the first anniversary of his country's independence. Capital of the newly created kingdom, the city of Amman, saw a great march past of the armed forces. A national celebration by a people with whom we have many ties of friendship.
The country finally got its independence from Britain in 1946. After independence, though, Jordan got involved in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Unfortunately for the Palestinians and Jordanians, Israel won the war and went on to become the regional power. Despite continued efforts by the Jordanian army to support subsequent Arab campaigns against Israel, the tide of Israeli victories against Arab coalitions has been overwhelming to date. As a result of these defeats and internal Arab differences, Jordanian authorities have been progressively diminishing in their support of offensive wars against Israel. Naturally, this withdrawal of its resources has caused numerous irritations, and Jordan has now gotten the simultaneous reputation as the unenthusiastic partner to Arab unity, but also Israel's loyal adversary. However, this reputation isn't fully deserved. When Israel launched their traditional style of surprise attack on Jordan in 1968, the Jordanian army put up a spirited defense and repelled the Israeli attack, giving modern Israel a rare loss against an Arab army. This victory restored the Jordanian people's faith in the nation's defense forces after the thrashing they got in the Six-Day War. After squaring off with the Israelis and coming out on top, proving that they weren't a walkover, Jordan's authorities now had to prove the same to their internal detractors. You see, during this time, Jordan had been sheltering Palestinian refugees, including elements of their armed militia known as the People's Liberation Movement. While sporadic fighting continued with the Israelis throughout the late 60s, it progressively became a sideshow as differences between the Jordanian government and the People's Liberation Movement became worse and more apparent. In 1970, the gloves came off. All-out war was declared against the People's Liberation Movement. Jordan claimed that some Palestinian liberation fighters had abused the Jordanian government's hospitality and began meddling in its affairs. To make matters worse, the Syrian army invaded Jordan in support of the PLO, crippling the idea of Arab unity when it came to the Palestinian cause.
In a situation where Palestinian guerrillas could feel free to hijack foreign airliners to the Jordanian desert, it must seem to the world as if no part of King Hussein's Jordan is free of occupation. Beneath the flag of Palestine, threats of violent death hung over the captive passengers and crews. Jordan was not even party to the negotiations for their release.
I mean, when refugees turn your capital city into a battleground against the hosting government, there's only one direction for them if they lose: the door.
Good evening. That film of the Battle of Amman is the first to come out of the Jordanian capital since the fighting began 7 days ago.
The firing started at exactly 10 to 5 this morning, just as Amman was waking up to the first day of its proposed general strike. Earlier on, the guerrillas moved in their heavy armory, their B-40s and B-20 rockets, and their heavy machine guns. And a few moments ago, from the hills close to the Royal Palace, the Royal Jordanian Army began firing its artillery into the center of Amman. Tanks and Saladin armored cars were ordered into Amman shortly after 6 this morning, an hour after the fighting first broke out. As they drove through the town, they were met with rocket and machine gun fire from the guerrillas.
The PLO was expelled. After this, Jordan drastically decreased armed hostilities with Israel, but maintained diplomatic support for Palestine. In 1994, Jordan signed a peace treaty with Israel, bringing an end to the state of war that they had maintained since the 1948 war. So you can argue that Israel isn't the only country in the Middle East surrounded by hostile neighbors. In a way, Jordan has also been fighting an equally long, but less appreciated and lonely battle for its own welfare with hostile neighbors. Now, most of the country's progress and problems are as a result of the reign of King Hussein, who ascended to the throne in 1952 after a brief 13-month stint by his dad, Talal bin Abdullah, who abdicated the throne due to illness. When King Hussein died in 1999, his son King Abdullah II took over and has largely maintained the international positions that his father took. His biggest challenge to date was probably the risk of being dethroned during the Arab Spring, but even as that threat came and went, it hasn't really affected his style of government. Ever since the PLO disturbances in the 70s, the city of Amman has become a place of peace. The city continues to shelter refugees fleeing conflict from the ever-turbulent Middle East region. The predictability that Amman offers in this region of strife should be recognized more. With Saudi Arabia, Israel, Syria, and Iraq for neighbors, it's not hard to imagine a scenario whereby a festering quarrel makes peace a fantasy for Amman's residents. Losing a regional popularity contest may be something Jordanians may have to continue enduring. In my view, this is a small price to pay provided that an organic peace is kept in this tinderbox part of the world.
Coming to Jordan is like a travel through history. You start with the ancient times.
Here we have Israel behind. This is the valley of the river Jordan. We are on the top of the Mount Nebo, where God told to Moses that this is the promised land. This is the place where Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. The river Jordan, and this is the water used to baptize Jesus Christ. By the other side of the river we have the Palestine.
We are in Madaba. Behind me is the Church of St. George. This church contains a very important mosaic. This is the oldest map existing in the world of the Palestine and the Egypt and the various biblical sites. At the center, you can find Jerusalem. Then you move into the Roman times, well represented by Jerash, which is an amazing city, still quite well preserved.
We are in Jerash, the ancient city of Gerasa. This is the Ark of the Emperor Hadrian. Just arrived in Amman, known in the ancient time as Philadelphia, and we are now in the Roman theater. The Roman theater.
We are in the citadel of Amman, which is an important archaeological site, important because you can see in it influences from different times, from the Greek, Roman, Byzantine and Arabic times. Behind me, there's the Umayyadis palace.
I felt that in some respect the culture here is similar to ours in terms of the value, the family value.